the true story of the Holy Grail, legend or reality. Introduction: the Holy Grail. Few artifacts in the tapestry of human myth and legend hold such a potent and enduring grip on our collective imagination. It is a symbol that resonates across centuries, a shimmering ideal that has inspired countless works of art, literature, music, and film. It represents the ultimate quest, an object of divine power, promising eternal life, infinite wisdom, or redemption for a wounded land. But where does this powerful story truly originate? Is it a Christian relic with a traceable historical path, waiting to be discovered in some forgotten crypt? Or is it something else entirely, a psychological archetype, a literary invention, or a metaphor for a spiritual journey that has no physical form? For over 1,000 years, the Grail has been a mirror, reflecting the deepest yearnings of the age, for divine connection, for healing, for purpose. To trace its story is to embark on a quest of our own, sifting through layers of history, religion, mythology, and pure fiction to uncover the true nature of this most enigmatic of treasures. This exploration will take us from the dusty pages of ancient Celtic prehistory to the soaring romances of the European Middle Ages, from the crucifixion hill of Golgotha to the psychology of the modern human soul. We will examine the evidence for its existence, the sources of its legend, and the reasons for its unwavering power. The question we seek to answer is not simply what is the Grail, but why does the Grail continue to captivate us? Part 1. The Seed. Celtic myths and pre-Christian cauldrons. Before the Grail was holy, and before it was a chalice, its essence existed in a different form within the rich mythological traditions of the Celtic peoples of Britain and Brittany. To understand the Grail, we must first look to these older, darker, and more primal stories, for they provide the foundational soil from which the later Christian legend would grow. The most direct precursor to the Grail is not a cup, but a cauldron. In the Welsh myth cycle known as the Mabinogion, compiled in the 12th and 13th centuries, but containing much older oral traditions, we encounter magical cauldrons that bear a striking resemblance to the later Grail. The most famous is the cauldron of the chief of the underworld, Unwin. This is no ordinary cooking pot. It is a cauldron of rebirth, of regeneration. It is said that dead warriors could be thrown into it and would come back to life, though they would be unable to speak. This motif of a vessel that restores life is a clear antecedent to the life-sustaining power attributed to the Holy Grail. Another key Celtic figure is Bran the Blessed, a giant and king of Britain. He possesses a magical cauldron that has the power to resurrect the dead. Importantly, this cauldron is a central object of quest and conflict. It is given to Bran as a gift of reconciliation, and later becomes a prized treasure to be won or lost. This narrative structure, a magical vessel that is the focus of a heroic endeavor, is a direct blueprint for the Grail romances. Furthermore, Bran is eventually mortally wounded in his foot, a theme echoed in the Fisher King's wound, and his head, after being cut from his body, continues to speak and act as a protective talisman for his people. The concept of a severed head as a source of wisdom and protection intertwines with the vessel's power, suggesting a deep pre-Christian link between sovereignty, the land's well-being, and a magical object. Perhaps the most significant Celtic link comes from the story of Peredur, a Welsh hero who is the clear prototype for Sir Percival of the Grail legends. In the Welsh tale Peredur, son of Efrog, the young hero witnesses a strange procession in a castle. He sees a young man carrying a bleeding lance, followed by two youths carrying a large platter on which rests a man's severed head, swimming in blood. This is a shocking and visceral image, a world away from the sanctified Christian relic it would become. There is no chalice here, but a platter which aligns with the word Grail, meaning a dish or platter, and a head. The head is often interpreted as a symbol of power and knowledge, and the blood signifies both sacrifice and life force. These Celtic myths establish core themes that would be seamlessly absorbed into the Grail legend. A wounded king whose ailment reflects the sickness of his land. A magical vessel or object that possesses the power of life and death. A young, often naive hero who must embark on a quest to find this object and ask the right question to heal the king and restore the wasteland. And a mysterious otherworldly castle where the central mystery is revealed. The Grail story, in its essence, is a Celtic myth that was later dressed in Christian garb. The cauldron of rebirth became the cup of the Last Supper. The severed head became the body of Christ. The blood of sacrificed warriors became the blood of the Savior. This transformation did not erase the older pagan roots, but rather built upon them, creating a complex and layered symbol that could speak to the converted Christian without losing the primal, archetypal power of the ancient stories. The soil was now prepared. The next step was for a Christian seed to be planted within it. Part 2. The Christian Frame, the Gospel and Apocryphal Traditions. While the Celtic world provided the narrative structure and magical framework, it was Christianity that provided the sacred identity for the Grail. The transformation from a pagan cauldron of plenty to the most holy Christian relic required a powerful story of its own, one that would root it firmly in the foundational events of the Christian faith. This process involved a blend of canonical scripture, apocryphal literature, and later medieval devotion. The most direct biblical link, and the one that has become synonymous with the Grail, is the cup used by Jesus Christ at the Last Supper. The Gospels of Matthew, Mark, and Luke all describe Jesus taking a cup, giving thanks, and offering it to his disciples with the words, "This cup is the new covenant in my blood, which is poured out for you." This moment, the institution of the Eucharist, is the cornerstone of Christian liturgy. The vessel used in this sacred act would, by logical extension, be imbued with immense holiness. However, the Gospels themselves are silent on the fate of this cup after the Last Supper. It simply vanishes from the biblical record, leaving a vacuum that would be filled by legend and speculation. This is where apocryphal and legendary sources enter the picture. The most important figure to emerge in the Grail's Christian origin story is Joseph of Arimathea, a wealthy disciple who, according to all four Gospels, provided his own new tomb for the burial of Jesus. Early Christian tradition expanded his role significantly. In the Acts of Pilate, also known as the Gospel of Nicodemus, a text dating from the 4th or 5th century, Joseph is imprisoned for his belief in Christ's resurrection. He is sustained by a heavenly vision of Christ, but the text makes no mention of a cup. The critical connection between Joseph and the Grail was forged in the late 12th century by a Burgundian poet named Robert de Boron. In his seminal work, Joseph d'Arimathie, c. 1200, Robert de Boron crafted the definitive Christian history of the Grail. In his version, Joseph of Arimathea is the one who collects the blood of Jesus in the very cup used at the Last Supper. Either at the crucifixion itself or during the moment Jesus was taken down from the cross. This act forever fuses the two most powerful Christian symbols, the chalice of the Eucharist and the blood of the Passion. Robert de Boron's narrative continues. After Jesus' ascension, Joseph is imprisoned by the Jews, left to starve. But he is sustained for years by the Holy Grail itself, which provides him with heavenly nourishment. Upon his release, he is said to have led a group of followers, including his sister and her husband Braun the rich fisher, westward. They carried the Grail with them as a sacred relic, a source of guidance and sustenance. Before his death, Joseph establishes a lineage of guardians for the Grail, passing the sacred duty to Braun. This story provided a crucial missing link, a historical journey that could explain how the most sacred relic of Jerusalem found its way to the distant shores of Britain. The setting for the Arthurian romances. This invented history served a powerful purpose. It gave the Grail an impeccable Christian pedigree, directly connecting it to the central moments of salvation history. It was no longer a mysterious Celtic cauldron, but the vessel of the Passion. Its power was not merely magical but divine, stemming from the blood of God himself. This transformation elevated the Grail from an object of folkloric wonder to the ultimate goal of Christian knightly quest, a relic whose discovery would require not just bravery, but profound piety and purity. The stage was now set. The Grail had a history and a holy purpose. All it needed was a world to enter, and that world was the court of King Arthur. Part 3. The literary birth, the Troy, and the first Grail romance. The Celtic myths provided the raw archetypes, and Christian tradition provided the sacred provenance. Yet the Holy Grail as we conceptualize it today, a mysterious, luminous object, pursued by knights of the Round Table, was born not in a church or an ancient bard, Estelle, but in the creative mind of a courtly poet. Around 1180, the French writer Diderot, already famous for his Arthurian romances like Lancelot and Yvain, began his final and most enigmatic work, Percival, ou le Conte du Graal, Percival, or the Story of the Graal. It is here that the threads of myth and religion were first woven together into the tapestry that would captivate Europe. Story introduces us to Percival, a naive Welsh boy raised by his mother in isolation from the world of knighthood. following the traumatic deaths of his father and brothers. Driven by a childish desire for glory, he leaves home and eventually arrives at the court of King Arthur, where his natural prowess earns him a place among the knights. The heart of the romance occurs when Percival stumbles upon the mysterious castle of the Fisher King, a ruler who has been wounded in the thighs, a traditional euphemism for a groin injury, and cannot be healed. This wound has bled into the very land itself, which has become barren and desolate, a wasteland, a powerful symbol of spiritual and physical infertility. At the castle, Percival witnesses a strange procession. First, a squire carries a white lance from the tip of which a single drop of blood falls. Then, beautiful maidens enter, one carrying a dazzling grail. S. description is deliberately mysterious. He does not call it holy, he simply uses the old French word graal, which refers to a wide, somewhat deep platter or dish, used for serving expensive foods at lavish feasts. But this is no ordinary dish. It is made of fine gold and adorned with precious jewels, and it radiates a light so brilliant that it extinguishes the glow of the candles in the hall as the sun obscures the stars. Later, we learn its miraculous property. It carries a single communion wafer that sustains the life of the Fisher King's father, a holy man who has lived for years without any other nourishment. This is the first appearance of the Grail in literature, and it is already a complex fusion of elements. It is a vessel of sustenance, the Celtic cauldron. It is connected to a wound and a wasted land, the Celtic sovereignty myth, and its function is to provide a Eucharistic wafer, the Christian sacrament, yet its exact nature remains undefined. The critical moment, the moment of failure that sets the entire quest in motion, comes from Percival's own character. Remembering the advice of his mentor, Gormund, who told him that a worthy knight does not speak too much, Percival remains silent. He does not ask the question that burns within him: whom does the Grail serve? This failure of compassion, this adherence to courtly etiquette over innate human curiosity and empathy, has dire consequences. The next morning, the castle is empty. He leaves and soon after meets a maiden who reveals the cost of his silence. Had he asked the question, the Fisher King would have been healed and his land restored. Percival's quest for redemption becomes the engine of the story. De Trod died before finishing Percival, leaving the poem incomplete and the mystery unresolved. This incompleteness was perhaps the most significant factor in the Grail's explosive popularity. It was a puzzle without a solution, a story begging for an ending. Other writers immediately rushed in to provide their own conclusions and expansions, creating what scholars call the Continental Grail cycles. These continuations, often written by monks or clerics, began to aggressively Christianize this mysterious object. The most important of these was the work of Robert de Boron, who, as we discussed, provided the Grail with its full Christian history through Joseph of Arimathea. In these cycles, the Grail is explicitly identified as the cup of the Last Supper and the vessel of the Passion. The lance becomes the holy lance that pierced Christ's side on the cross. The courtly quest for honor becomes a spiritual quest for divine grace. The Grail, now capitalized and unequivocally holy, was ready for its most famous English portrayal. Part 4. The Apotheosis, the Vulgate Cycle, and Sir Thomas Malory. The Grail legend reached its most elaborate and influential form in the early 13th century with a vast collection of French prose narratives known as the Vulgate Cycle or the Lancelot Grail Cycle. This massive work, likely written by Cistercian monks, represents the full synthesis of the Arthurian universe with the theology of the Grail. It consists of 5 volumes that trace the story from the Grail's origins in the Passion to the death of Arthur. Here the Grail is no longer just a goal. It is the moral and spiritual center of the Arthurian world, a divine presence that judges the worth of every knight and ultimately proves incompatible with the worldly chivalry of Camelot. The Vulgate Cycle introduces several crucial developments. First, it establishes the Grail Knights as a spiritual elect. The quest for the Grail is not for everyone. It is the ultimate test of purity, faith, and divine grace. The cycle introduces the concept of the Siege Perilous, a vacant seat at the Round Table reserved for the one knight worthy enough to achieve the Grail. This knight is not Percival, but the pure and pious Galahad, the son of Lancelot. Lancelot, the greatest of all knights in worldly terms, is rendered impotent in the Grail quest because of his adulterous love for Queen Guinevere. He can only glimpse the Grail in a moment of ecstasy, but his sin prevents him from truly achieving it, and he falls into a trance for 24 days. This creates a powerful dichotomy: the human, flawed love of Lancelot and Guinevere versus the divine, perfect grace represented by Galahad and the Grail. The quest itself becomes a series of hermetic adventures, full of religious symbolism. Knights encounter holy hermits who interpret their dreams and visions, which are always allegories of their spiritual state. The Grail appears at Arthur's court, covered in white silk, and fills the hall with fragrant aromas, and miraculously provides every knight with the food and drink he most desires. It is a moment of divine grace offered to the entire fellowship. But then it vanishes, and the knights vow to embark on a quest to find it once more. This quest, however, leads to the disintegration of the Round Table. The knights ride off alone into the wilderness, and many meet their deaths, not in glorious battle, but in spiritual failure or melancholy. The world of Arthurian adventure is subsumed by the demands of a higher ascetic calling. The final culmination occurs in the Questa del Saint Graal section of the Vulgate cycle. Galahad, Percival, and Bors, the only knight to achieve the Grail, despite having fathered a child, due to his unwavering faith, are the three worthy knights who finally reach the Grail castle, Corbinic. There, they experience a mystical mass. Joseph of Arimathea appears as a priest. Christ himself emerges from the Grail to administer the sacrament. The three knights are granted a vision of the divine mystery, seeing directly into the Grail. For Galahad, the ultimate prize is granted. He is allowed to gaze upon the ultimate truth, to have all of his questions answered. Having achieved this, his soul is taken up to heaven by angels, and his body dies in a state of perfect grace. This version of the story presents the Grail as utterly transcendent. It cannot be possessed. It can only be witnessed by the pure in heart, and then it withdraws from the world, its purpose fulfilled. With the Grail gone, the spiritual energy that sustained the higher ideals of Camelot vanishes. The knights return to a diminished court, and the narrative accelerates toward the tragic civil war and the death of Arthur. The message is clear. The ideal of divine grace is fleeting and cannot coexist with the flawed nature of humanity. The Grail was never meant to be a permanent fixture in the world. It was a glimpse of heaven that, once seen, made the earthly realm seem barren by comparison. This grand theological version of the legend was translated and condensed a century later by the English knight Sir Thomas Malory in his seminal work, Le Morte d'Arthur, c. 1469. Malory streamlined the complex French cycles into a more cohesive narrative, and it is through his work that the Grail legend passed into the English-speaking consciousness. While he retains the supreme purity of Galahad and the failure of Lancelot, Malory, a prisoner of war, writing about a lost age of chivalry, infuses the tale with a more elegiac and nostalgic tone. The Grail quest is the peak of Arthur's reign, but also the beginning of its end. The quest proves that the highest ideals of knighthood are ultimately unattainable in a fallen world. The Grail, in Malory's hands, becomes a symbol of a lost perfection, a brief moment of divine glory that illuminates the tragedy of what is to follow. Part 5. The historical hunt, relics, bloodlines, and modern conspiracies. The enduring power of the Grail legend inevitably provoked a pressing question. Could it be real? If the Grail was a physical object, a relic of the Passion, then where did it go? This line of inquiry launched a historical and pseudo-historical quest that continues to this day, blending scholarly research with wild speculation, and giving rise to some of the most popular and controversial theories of the modern age. The most straightforward claim to possessing the Holy Grail comes from several churches across Europe. In the Cathedral of Valencia, Spain, a simple agate cup, known as the Santo, has been venerated as the true Grail since the 15th century. Archaeologists date the cup itself to the 1st century BC or AD, from a workshop in Palestine, which lends a tantalizing layer of plausibility. Its history is traced from Rome to Huesca, Spain, with monks protecting it during the Muslim invasion. Similarly, the Genoa Cathedral in Italy houses the Sacro Catono, a hexagonal green glass dish said to have been used at the Last Supper, and later brought to Genoa after the First Crusade. It was later discovered to be glass, not emerald as once believed. These relics satisfy a deep human desire for tangible connection to the divine, yet definitive proof remains elusive. They are articles of faith, not of history. The 20th century, however, witnessed a seismic shift in Grail speculation, moving it from church sacristies into the realm of popular conspiracy and alternative history. This shift was catalyzed by the 1982 publication of The Holy Blood and the Holy Grail by Michael Bagent, Richard Lee, and Henry Lincoln. This controversial book proposed a radical and captivating theory. The Holy Grail, Sangreal, is actually a misreading of Sangreal, which translates to royal blood. The Grail, therefore, is not a cup at all, but the sacred and secret lineage of Jesus Christ himself. The book argues that Jesus survived the crucifixion, married Mary Magdalene, fathered children, and that his bloodline, the Merovingian dynasty, fled to the south of France, where it was protected for centuries by a secret society, the Priory of St. The Holy Grail, in this interpretation, becomes the womb of Mary Magdalene and the descendants of Christ, a living secret that threatens the very foundations of Orthodox Christianity. While thoroughly debunked by historians, the Priory of Sion was a hoax created by Pierre Plantard in the 1950s. The theory's narrative power was undeniable. It tapped into postmodern distrust of institutions, fascination with hidden histories, and a desire to re-evaluate the role of the sacred feminine, symbolized by Mary Magdalene, which had been suppressed by the patriarchal church. This theory formed the fictional core of Don Brown's 2003 blockbuster novel, The Da Vinci Code, which injected these ideas into the global mainstream on an unprecedented scale. Brown's novel, while presented as fiction, was convincingly framed enough to lead millions of readers to believe in its historical premises. The Grail was now a cultural phenomenon, a symbol of the ultimate hidden truth, waiting to be uncovered by those clever enough to decipher the clues. This quest for a historical Grail has also taken a more nationalistic turn. In Great Britain, a persistent legend claims that Joseph of Arimathea himself brought the Grail to Glastonbury, a site already rich with Arthurian connections. Some versions say he buried it deep beneath the famous Glastonbury Tor. Others claim it lies at the bottom of the chalice, well, whose waters, tinted red by iron oxide, are said to flow with the blood of Christ. This connection between the Grail and the British landscape underscores how the legend has been used to sanctify national identity and claim a unique spiritual heritage. The historical hunt, whether for a dusty artifact or a hidden bloodline, reveals less about the past and more about the present. It shows our relentless desire to materialize the mystical, to provide evidence for faith, and to believe that the greatest secrets of history are still out there, waiting to be found. It transforms the Grail from a symbol of spiritual quest into an object of an intellectual or even forensic one. Yet, in doing so, it often overlooks the deeper, more enduring power of the legend as a psychological and archetypal story. Part 6. The Inner Castle, Psychology, Symbolism, and the Modern Quest. If the historical hunt for a physical Grail has proven inconclusive, perhaps its true reality lies not in the external world, but in the internal landscape of the human psyche. The most profound and enduring interpretation of the Grail legend may be a psychological one, where every character, every location, and the object itself represents a facet of our own inner world and our journey toward self. The pioneering psychoanalyst Carl Jung saw the Grail myth as a magnificent expression of the process of individuation, the journey toward wholeness, and integration of the conscious ego with the unconscious self. In this reading, the wounded Fisher King represents our own fractured state, our inner wounding often related to sexuality, creativity, or spirit, that prevents us from living a full and vibrant life. This personal wounding manifests externally as the wasteland, a life that feels barren, meaningless, or stuck in repetitive patterns. The young knight, Percival, is the nascent ego, the undeveloped consciousness setting out on the path of life. His initial failure to ask the crucial question, whom does the Grail serve, is a failure of consciousness itself. It represents a lack of introspection, a failure to connect with the deeper, guiding principles of the psyche, the self. He is too focused on the external rules of knighthood, the persona, and not on the inner call for compassion and understanding. The Grail Castle, then, is not a physical location but a symbolic state of being, a moment of profound connection with the unconscious. It appears to Percival when he is lost and wandering, signifying that these moments of insight and potential healing often come when we are most disoriented and have abandoned our rigid plans. The castle itself can be seen as the self, the central organizing principle of the psyche that we spend our lives seeking. The Grail and the lance are quintessential Jungian symbols. They are complementary symbols of masculine and feminine principles, not in a gendered sense, but as universal archetypes. The lance is a symbol of logos, direction, action, penetration, and spirit. The Grail, as a vessel, is a symbol of eros, receptivity, containment, nurturing, and soul. The Fisher King's wound, often in the thigh, signifies a disconnect between these two principles within him. The healing can only occur when the conscious mind Percival asks a question that acknowledges and seeks to serve this deeper unity. The question, "Whom does the Grail serve?" is perhaps the most important line in the entire mythos. On a psychological level, it means, what is the central, guiding principle of my being? What does my soul serve? The answer, implied in later versions, is that the Grail serves the Grail King, the true, whole self. The quest is about realizing that we do not possess the Grail. Rather, we must learn to serve it. We must align our conscious lives with the deeper demands of the soul. This psychological interpretation makes the Grail legend perennially relevant. The wasteland is a state we all recognize, the feeling of depression, alienation, or emptiness. The quest is the journey of therapy, spiritual practice, or any deep self-reflection. The healing question is the courage to look inward and ask, what is wrong? What is my purpose? How can I become whole? The Grail is not a trophy to be won, but a state of wholeness to be achieved. It is the feeling of a life lived with meaning, purpose, and connection, where the inner wound is acknowledged and integrated, and the personal wasteland begins to bloom again. In this sense, the Grail is utterly real. It may not be found in a castle or a church, but its pursuit is the most real and essential quest of human existence. Part 7. The Eternal Vessel. The Grail in Modern Culture, and the unanswered question. The journey of the Holy Grail did not end in the Middle Ages or in the psychologist's consulting room. It has proven to be an infinitely adaptable symbol, seamlessly transitioning into the modern and postmodern eras, finding new life in film, literature, music, and video games. Its core themes, the quest for the unattainable, the search for meaning, the confrontation with one's own flaws, and the hope for redemption, resonate as powerfully today as they did in the 12th century. The Grail has become a cultural shorthand for the ultimate goal, whether that goal is noble, humorous, or purely commercial. In cinema, the Grail has been explored with both earnestness and adventure. The most iconic modern portrayal is undoubtedly in Steven Spielberg's and George Lucas's Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade, 1989. Here, the Grail is explicitly a historical artifact, but the film brilliantly translates the medieval quest's themes into a blockbuster format. Indiana Jones's quest is not just to find the Grail before the Nazis, but to heal his own wasteland, his fractured relationship with his father. The final test in the Grail Temple is not one of strength, but of faith and humility. The knight who guards the Grail utters the film's defining line, "You must choose, but choose wisely, for while the true Grail will bring you life, the false Grail will take it from you." This is a perfect distillation of the legend's moral core. The quest requires spiritual, not just physical, fitness. The film also cleverly presents the Grail, not as a jewel-encrusted treasure, but as a simple carpenter's cup, emphasizing that true value is inherent, not decorative. Other films have taken more metaphorical approaches. Monty Python and the Holy Grail, 1975, uses the absurdity of the quest to satirize everything from the Arthurian legend and the cowardice of medieval knights to the bureaucratic nonsense of modern government. Yet, even in its relentless absurdity, the film acknowledges the frustrating elusiveness of the goal. The Grail is never found, and the characters are arrested before they can achieve it. Terry Gilliam's The Fisher King, 1991, directly transplants the myth into modern New York City, where a radio shock jock, paralyzed by guilt, must help a homeless man traumatized by tragedy. Clear representation of the wounded Fisher King. The quest here is for a simple object, a trophy that symbolizes innocence lost, but its recovery leads to emotional and spiritual healing, restoring both men to life. In literature, the Grail continues to inspire. Authors like Bernard Cornwell in the Warlord Chronicles offer a gritty, historical take on Arthurian Britain, where the Grail is a desperate quest for a symbol to unite a fractured people. In fantasy genres, the influence is ubiquitous. The quest for a powerful, life-giving object is a central plot in countless stories. From J.R.R. Tolkien's One Ring, a darkened version of the Grail, to the myriad of magical artifacts in role-playing games and fantasy novels, The structure of the quest, a fellowship setting out, facing trials that test their character, and a final confrontation with a great evil is the direct heir of the Grail romances. Perhaps the most telling modern incarnation of the Grail is in our consumer culture. The term Holy Grail is used to describe the ultimate, often elusive, product in any field: the Holy Grail of skincare, the Holy Grail of video games, the Holy Grail of renewable energy. This usage demonstrates how the symbol has been diluted, yet it also proves its enduring power. It remains our most potent metaphor for the pinnacle of achievement, the ultimate answer to a pressing need. And so, we return to our original question: legend or reality? The evidence presented through this exploration suggests that the answer is not a binary choice. The Holy Grail is a legend in the sense that there is no credible historical evidence for a single physical cup that possessed miraculous powers and was pursued by King Arthur's knights. As a specific historical object, it remains firmly in the realm of story. However, to dismiss it as only a legend is to miss its profound reality. The Grail is real as a cultural and psychological archetype. It is real because it has existed for centuries as a powerful engine of creativity, inspiring some of the greatest art the world has ever known. It is real because its narrative structure of a wound, a wasteland, a quest, and a healing question mirrors the fundamental human experience of suffering, search, and potential redemption. It is real because it gives form to our deepest yearnings for something beyond the mundane, for a connection to the divine, however we may define it, and for a sense of purpose that transcends our individual lives. The true story of the Holy Grail is that it has no single story. It is a perpetual motion machine of meaning. It is a Celtic cauldron, a Christian chalice, a knightly quest, a bloodline, a psychological symbol, and a cinematic MacGuffin. Its true power lies in its emptiness, its vessel-like quality to be filled with whatever a particular age, or a particular individual, needs it to contain. It serves not a Grail king, but humanity itself, reflecting back at us our eternal desire to seek, to question, and to find wholeness. The quest has never been about finding an object. It has always been about becoming the kind of person who is worthy of the search. And in that sense, the Grail is as real as we choose to make it. Part 8. The Grail as a mirror, reflecting society's hopes and fears. The evolution of the Grail legend is not merely a literary or historical curiosity. It is a barometer of Western society's evolving values, anxieties, and aspirations. By examining how the story has been reshaped across centuries, we can see a clear reflection of the culture that retold it. The Grail functions as a mirror, its surface polished by each generation to reveal their own image alongside the eternal archetype. In the High Middle Ages, when de Troye and Wolfram von Eschenbach were writing, Europe was defined by the ideals of chivalry and the overwhelming power of the Catholic Church. The Crusades were at their height, creating a fervent interest in the physical relics of the Holy Land. The Grail romances of this era perfectly capture this spirit. The quest is a martial one, undertaken by knights, but its goal is profoundly spiritual. It represents a fusion of the warrior ethos with the religious zeal of the age. The knight was expected to be both a formidable fighter and a pious Christian. The Grail quest was the ultimate expression of this dual ideal, a calling that required both physical prowess and spiritual purity. Furthermore, the Church's increasing institutional power is reflected in the later versions, like the Vulgate cycle, where the Grail becomes explicitly Eucharistic, and its guardians are celibate monks and virginal knights like Galahad, signaling a shift toward asceticism and clerical authority. The Romantic era of the 19th century witnessed a revival of interest in the Middle Ages, but through a nostalgic and nationalistic lens. Writers like Alfred, Lord Tennyson, in his epic poem Idylls of the King, reinterpreted the Arthurian legends for Victorian England. In Tennyson's version, the Grail quest is a destructive, almost fanatical pursuit that leads to the downfall of the Round Table. His Sir Percival is a zealot, and Lancelot is consumed by guilt. This reflects Victorian anxieties about religious extremism and the conflict between rigid morality and human passion. The Grail here is an unattainable ideal whose pursuit leads to the neglect of earthly duties and responsibilities, a warning about the dangers of abandoning the real world for a spiritual chimera. The tumultuous 20th century, with its world wars, ideological struggles, and rapid technological change, produced Grail stories preoccupied with conspiracy, the individual against the system, and the search for meaning in a fragmented world. The theories presented in the Holy Blood and the Holy Grail are a quintessential product of their time. They exhibit a deep distrust of established institutions, especially the Church, a fascination with hidden histories and secret societies, and a desire to find alternative spiritualities that empower the individual seeker over the religious hierarchy. The Grail is no longer a gift from God, but a secret to be uncovered, a truth that has been suppressed by a powerful conspiracy. This aligns perfectly with the postmodern skepticism of grand narratives and the desire to deconstruct traditional sources of authority. Today, in the 21st century, the Grail's reflections are even more diverse. It appears in video games like Assassin's Creed and Final Fantasy as a powerful artifact to be won, translating the quest into an interactive achievement for the player. In young adult fiction, it is often woven into narratives of self-discovery and confronting one's heritage. The modern interpretation often emphasizes the journey over the destination, focusing on the internal growth of the quester rather than the object itself. Furthermore, contemporary retellings are far more likely to challenge the traditional gender roles of the story. Stories now explore the perspective of Morgan Le Fay, or create new female knights who claim the quest for themselves, or recenter Mary Magdalene not as a vessel but as a prophet and leader in her own right. This reflects our current cultural conversations about gender equality, inclusivity, and re-evaluating history from marginalized perspectives. The Grail's enduring presence proves that a powerful symbol is never static. It is a cultural sponge, absorbing the concerns of the present and offering a narrative framework through which to process them. We continually reinvent the Grail, because we continually need a vessel to contain our own hopes for transcendence and our fears of a spiritual wasteland. Part 9. Conclusion. The enduring quest. We have journeyed from the misty cauldrons of Celtic myth to the glittering bites of digital games. We have seen the Grail as a dish, a chalice, a bloodline, a psyche, and a consumer product. We have followed scholars, poets, conspiracy theorists, and psychologists, each offering their answer to the riddle of its enduring power. So, what final conclusion can we draw about the true story of the Holy Grail? The evidence is overwhelming that as a specific, historical object, the Cup of Christ hunted by Arthur's knights, the Holy Grail, is a legend. It is a literary phenomenon, born from the genius of de Troyes, fused with Christian theology by Robert de Boron, and elevated to spiritual heights by the anonymous monks of the Vulgate cycle. There is no evidence that a knight named Percival or Galahad ever existed, nor that a castle called Corbenic ever housed a divine relic. The story is a magnificent work of fiction, but to stop there is to miss the profound and undeniable reality of the Grail. Its truth lies not in history, but in meaning. The Grail is real because it answers a deep and abiding human need. It is real as a psychological archetype that gives form to our inner struggle for wholeness. It is real as a cultural constant, a narrative that has shown a unique ability to evolve and remain relevant for almost a millennium. It is real because it has inspired breathtaking art, music, and literature that continue to move us. It is real because the questions at the heart of the legend are the very questions that define the human condition. How do we heal what is wounded within us? How do we restore a world that often feels barren? What must we do to live a life of meaning and purpose? The true story of the Holy Grail is that it is all of these things simultaneously. It is a legend and a reality. It is a Christian relic and a pagan symbol. It is a physical object and a metaphysical idea. Its power is precisely in this duality, this ability to be both things at once. It is the ultimate vessel because it can hold so many conflicting meanings without breaking. Perhaps the final lesson of the Grail is that the quest itself is the point. The knight-errant who rides out seeking a tangible object inevitably returns having found something else entirely. Self-knowledge. The value is not in the finding, but in the seeking. The process of the quest, with its trials, failures, and moments of grace is what transforms the quester. The Grail, therefore, is not a thing to be possessed, but an experience to be undergone. And so, the quest continues. It continues in every person who seeks to mend a personal wound, to find purpose in their life, or to connect with something greater than themselves. The castle of the Fisher King appears to all of us at different points in our lives, offering a fleeting glimpse of what wholeness might look like. The critical question, whom does the Grail serve, remains the most important one we can ask ourselves. It challenges us to look beyond our ego and ask what principles guide our lives, what our soul truly serves. The Holy Grail is eternal because the human need to quest is eternal. It will never be found once and for all, and that is its greatest gift. It will always be there, just beyond the next horizon, inviting us to become the heroes of our own stories, to heal our own wastelands, and to ask the question that leads to healing. The Grail is not lost. It is waiting. Part 10: The Grail in the 21st Century and Beyond. A never-ending story as we stand in the present day. The legend of the Holy Grail shows no signs of fading into obscurity. If anything, its cultural footprint is expanding and evolving at an unprecedented rate, adapting to new technologies and global conversations. The digital age has not diminished the Grail's power, but has provided new arenas for its expression and new frameworks for its interpretation. In contemporary literature, the Grail continues to be a potent source of inspiration. Authors are increasingly deconstructing the traditional Arthurian narrative, examining it through critical and often revisionist lenses. Works like The Once and Future King by T.H. White and Marion Zimmer Bradley's The Mists of Avalon challenged the male-dominated Christian-centric narrative, giving voice to previously marginalized characters like Morgan Le Fay and exploring themes of religious conflict, gender dynamics, and the tragic cost of idealism. This trend continues today with a wave of new novels that queer the Arthurian legend, reimagine it in futuristic or alternate history settings, or explore it from the perspective of commoners and outsiders, asking who the grand quests of kings truly serve. The Grail in these stories is often a symbol of contested power, a MacGuffin whose real meaning is determined by who seeks it and why. The world of gaming has become one of the most vibrant new territories for the Grail quest. From massive multiplayer online games, MMOs, to narrative-driven adventures, the structure of the quest, find the magical artifact to heal the land, is a foundational trope. Games like The Witcher 3, Wild Hunt, and the Dragon Age series are steeped in Arthurian imagery and themes, presenting players with morally complex choices that determine the fate of kingdoms. The interactive nature of gaming makes the player the direct participant in the quest, forcing them to confront their own values and strategies. The Grail is no longer a passive object in a story. It is the ultimate reward at the end of a challenging dungeon. The prize that requires a player to master game mechanics, solve puzzles, and often cooperate with others. This transforms the medieval spiritual journey into a modern test of skill, persistence, and teamwork, yet the core appeal of striving for a transformative goal remains intact. Furthermore, the Grail has found a new life in the realm of psychology and wellness. The language of the quest for wholeness and healing the inner wound has been wholeheartedly adopted by self-help and therapeutic traditions. While often stripped of its mythological context, the underlying archetype is clear. The journey to overcome personal trauma, to integrate disparate parts of the self, and to find a state of peace and fulfillment is the modern secular equivalent of the Grail quest. Therapists might not use the term Fisher King, but they work with clients to identify and address the core wound that creates a personal wasteland of depression or anxiety. In this sense, the Grail has been democratized. It is no longer the pursuit of a spiritual elite, but a universal metaphor for the human project of self-improvement and healing. Looking to the future, the questions that surround the Grail are also evolving. As artificial intelligence becomes more sophisticated, could we one day see an AI tasked with solving the ultimate riddle of the Grail's location, processing every historical text, geological survey, and satellite image? As space exploration advances, will the metaphor of the quest be projected onto the search for life on other planets, the ultimate Holy Grail of science? The symbol is so flexible that it will inevitably be recruited to frame humanity's next great endeavors. The story of the Holy Grail is a never-ending story, because it is, fundamentally, our story. It is the narrative we tell ourselves about the search for meaning in an often chaotic and mysterious universe. It gives shape to our longing for transcendence and our hope that our efforts, our quests, and our questions matter. The Grail endures because it is not an answer, but an invitation to embark, to seek, and to become. Part 11. The Grail's silent language, symbolism, and allegory. To truly appreciate the depth of the Grail legend, one must become fluent in its silent language, the rich tapestry of symbolism and allegory that weaves through every version of the tale. The story operates on multiple levels simultaneously, as an adventure, a spiritual guide, and a complex code of metaphors waiting to be deciphered. Understanding this symbolic layer is key to unlocking the Grail's enduring power. The Grail itself is the supreme symbol, and its very nature is multifaceted. As a cup or chalice, it is a universal symbol of receptivity, containment, and the feminine principle. It represents the womb, the heart, and the soul vessels that receive and nurture life. In a spiritual context, it symbolizes the human consciousness ready to receive divine grace or enlightenment. As a stone, as in Wolfram von Eschenbach's Parzival, it represents permanence, foundation, and the unshakable truths of existence. It is the philosopher's stone of alchemy, a symbol of transformation and perfection. This duality, vessel and stone, soft and hard, receptive and solid, shows the Grail's function as a symbol of reconciliation between opposites, a key to achieving wholeness. The lance that bleeds is its necessary counterpart. It represents the masculine principle: action, direction, and penetration. It is a symbol of will, purpose, and the power to act in the world. Psychologically, it can represent the penetrating power of insight, or the wounding that is necessary for growth. Together, the Grail and the lance form a sacred duality. Their separation in the story, the lance causing a wound that only the Grail can heal, symbolizes a state of cosmic and personal imbalance. The quest, therefore, is to reunite these principles, to bring action into harmony with compassion, and will into alignment with wisdom. The Fisher King is one of the most poignant symbols. His wound, typically in the thigh or groin, is deeply significant. It is a wound of impotence and infertility, both literally and symbolically. It represents a rupture in the creative and life-giving energies of the individual, and, by extension, the kingdom. He cannot rule effectively, and the land mirrors his state, becoming a wasteland. He is named the Fisher King, which connects him to the sign of Pisces, the fish, an ancient Christian symbol. But fishing is also a passive, contemplative activity. He is a king who can no longer act, only wait. He symbolizes a state of consciousness that is wounded, stagnant, and waiting for an external catalyst, an innocent question to initiate healing. The wasteland is perhaps the most resonant symbol for a modern audience. It is the external reflection of an internal state. It represents a life devoid of meaning, purpose, and vitality. It is spiritual dryness, depression, and alienation. The condition of the land is tied directly to the health of its ruler, an ancient concept known as sympathetic magic, or, psychologically, as projection. We see our inner state reflected in our outer world. The restoration of the land through the healing of the king is a powerful allegory for the fact that personal transformation is the first step toward healing our relationship with the world around us. Finally, the quest itself is an allegory for the human journey through life. The knight who leaves the familiar court and ventures into the unknown forest represents the ego leaving the safety of convention to confront the challenges of the unconscious. The various trials, enemies, and helpers he meets are the internal complexes, fears, and strengths that one must face and integrate on the path to self-discovery. The castle of the Grail appears not on a map, but at a moment of psychological readiness, often when the knight is lost and has surrendered his egoic plans. This signifies that profound insight and potential healing occur when we are most open, vulnerable, and beyond our own cleverness. The genius of the Grail legend is that this symbolic language operates subconsciously on the reader or listener. One can enjoy the story as a thrilling adventure without understanding any of its deeper layers, yet still be subconsciously affected by its archetypal power. For those who look deeper, it becomes a manual for the soul, a map of the psyche, and a timeless allegory for the journey from fragmentation to wholeness. The Grail does not give answers. It speaks in a silent language of symbols, inviting each generation to listen and interpret its meaning anew. Part 12. The Guardians and the Secrets. Templars, Rosicrucians, and esoteric orders. The notion that the Grail must be protected from the unworthy has given rise to a compelling subplot within its legend. The idea of a secretive, enlightened order tasked with being its eternal guardian. This concept has powerfully captured the imagination and become intertwined with the histories of real and mythical esoteric societies, blurring the lines between history, legend, and conspiracy. The most famous of these alleged guardians are the Knights Templar. This historical Catholic military order was founded in the 12th century, precisely during the time the Grail romances were being written. Their stated purpose was to protect pilgrims traveling to the Holy Land. However, their rapid rise to immense wealth and power their mysterious practices, and their dramatic downfall fueled centuries of speculation. The theory posits that during their time in Jerusalem, stationed atop the Temple Mount, they did not simply protect pilgrims, they excavated beneath the Temple of Solomon. There, they discovered something of immense power, perhaps the Ark of the Covenant, documents proving the earthly bloodline of Christ, or the Holy Grail itself. This secret knowledge, the theory goes, explained their wealth and influence, and ultimately led to their destruction by a threatened King Philip IV of France and Pope Clement V in 1307. Though historically baseless, the idea of the Templars as guardians of a sublime secret has become a staple of alternative history, suggesting they smuggled the Grail to Scotland or elsewhere for safekeeping, where their order continued underground. This narrative seamlessly evolved into the legend of the Rose. In the early 17th century, two anonymous manifestos appeared in Germany, the Fama Fraternitatis and the Confessio Fraternitatis. They told the story of a mythical figure, Christian Rosenkreuz, who traveled to the East and acquired ancient wisdom, which he then used to form the secret Brotherhood of the Rosy Cross. This brotherhood, invisible yet working for the betterment of humanity, was said to possess all knowledge, including the secret of the Philosopher's Stone and the location of the Holy Grail. The Rosicrucian manifestos, likely a Lutheran allegory, sparked a frenzy across Europe. They presented the idea of an invisible college of enlightened adepts, the true guardians of ancient secrets, working behind the scenes of history. The Grail, in this context, transformed from a Christian relic into a symbol of ultimate esoteric knowledge, gnosis, the direct, experiential knowledge of the divine that transcends dogma. In the 18th and 19th centuries, these threads were woven into the tapestry of high-grade Freemasonry. Certain Masonic rites developed elaborate degree systems where the initiate would symbolically reenact the quest for the lost word or a hidden secret. The theme of the Temple of Solomon and its lost treasures is central to Masonic symbolism. It was a short step for Masonic lore to incorporate the legend of the exemplars as their spiritual forebears and the Grail as the ultimate symbol of lost knowledge to be recovered. For these esoteric traditions, the Grail quest is an internal, initiatic process. The candidate undergoes symbolic trials and gains progressive insights, moving toward a personal encounter with the divine within their own personal Grail. The persistent appeal of the secret society narrative reveals a deep human desire, the belief that truth and power are not gone, but merely hidden, protected by a wise elect, waiting for the right time to reveal them. It is a more comforting idea than the notion that these are merely metaphors for an internal, personal struggle. It externalizes the quest, making it a puzzle to be solved in the world, rather than a challenge to be faced in the mirror. Whether it is the Templars, the Rosicrucians, or a modern invention like the Priory of Sion, these alleged guardians serve a crucial mythic function. They are the promise that the Grail is real, that it is safe, and that the world is not abandoned to chance but is watched over by a hidden hand. They ensure that the quest, no matter how difficult, is never futile. Part 13. The Grail in a Secular Age, the quest for meaning beyond faith. In an increasingly secular and scientifically oriented world, one might expect an ancient religious myth like that of the Holy Grail to lose its relevance. Yet, the opposite has occurred. The Grail has not diminished, but has instead transformed, finding new resonance as a symbol for the most pressing human quests of the modern era, the search for meaning, purpose, and authenticity in a world often perceived as disenchanted. The decline of traditional religious frameworks in many societies has not erased the human need for transcendence and purpose. Instead, this need has often been redirected towards secular pursuits. The language of the quest and the Grail has been effortlessly adopted to describe these endeavors. The scientist tirelessly seeking a unifying theory of physics is on a quest for the Holy Grail of their field. The entrepreneur striving to build a world-changing company is on a Grail quest. The environmentalist working to discover a clean energy source is seeking a Grail to heal our planetary wasteland. In each case, the object of pursuit is more than a goal. It is imbued with a near-sacred significance, promising not just personal success, but a form of collective redemption or progress. The structure remains the same, a difficult journey, filled with trials and setbacks, in pursuit of a transformative object or idea that will restore balance and bring a new golden age. This secular Grail quest is also deeply personal. The modern emphasis on self-actualization and finding oneself is a direct descendant of the Grail legend. The therapy room, the yoga mat, the wilderness retreat, these have become the new landscapes of the quest. The wound is no longer the Fisher King's injury, but maybe past trauma, anxiety, or a feeling of existential emptiness. The Grail is a state of wholeness, self-acceptance, and authentic living. The tools of the quest are not prayer and penance, but mindfulness, introspection, and various therapeutic techniques. The question, whom does the Grail serve, translates to what is my purpose, or what do I truly value? The knight's journey inward mirrors the modern individual's journey of self-discovery, proving that the archetype of the quest is adaptable to any worldview, religious or secular. Furthermore, the Grail has become a powerful symbol in the critique of modern materialism. The Fisher King's wound is often interpreted as a spiritual malaise caused by an overemphasis on material wealth and power, state that perfectly describes the anxiety of modern consumer society. The wasteland is the spiritual emptiness that can persist even amidst material abundance. In this reading, the Grail represents everything that this materialistic world suppresses: mystery, wonder, connection, and the sacred. The quest is a rebellion against a disenchanted universe, a refusal to accept that reality is only what can be measured and sold. It is a search for re-enchantment, for finding the magical and the meaningful in the everyday. Artists, musicians, and writers often embark on this kind of Grail quest, seeking to create works that restore a sense of awe and depth to human experience. The digital age, for all its connectivity, has also created new forms of isolation and fragmentation, new wastelands of the soul. The constant noise of social media, the pressure of curated online identities, and the overwhelm of information can lead to a profound sense of dislocation. In this context, the Grail quest becomes a search for authentic connection and silence. It is a quest for genuine human interaction away from the digital performance, for moments of unmediated experience in nature, and for the quiet necessary to hear one's own inner voice. The Grail Castle, in the 21st century, might be a place where the Wi-Fi is disconnected, a sanctuary where one can remember who they are beyond the digital avatar. Thus, the Grail's journey into the secular age demonstrates its ultimate resilience. It is no longer just a Christian relic or a medieval romance. It has become a fundamental metaphor for the human struggle for meaning. It proves that the need for quest is innate. We may no longer believe in a physical cup held in a castle, but we still believe in the journey. We still believe in healing our wounds, in seeking our purpose, and in restoring the fruitfulness to our personal and collective landscapes. The Grail endures because it gives a timeless shape to this most human of impulses. Part 14. The Grail's shadow, obsession, failure, and the danger of the quest thus far. We have explored the Grail primarily as a positive, transformative symbol. However, like any powerful archetype, it possesses a shadow side. The quest is not always noble. It can become a destructive obsession. The Grail does not always heal. It can reveal the deepest flaws and failures of the seeker. To understand the legend in its entirety, we must venture into this darker territory, where the light of the Grail casts long and troubling shadows. The most immediate danger of the quest is spiritual pride. In the Vulgate Cycle's quest, Del Saint Grail, the Grail acts as a divine judge, separating the worthy Galahad from the unworthy. While Galahad is presented as the ideal, his perfection is also his inhumanity. He is a vessel of divine grace, but he lacks relatable human struggles. His success creates a hierarchy of holiness that can foster arrogance and a judgmental attitude. For those who see themselves as questers, this can translate into a sense of spiritual superiority, a belief that their path or their purity sets them above others. The quest, meant to lead to humility before the divine, can instead fuel the ego's desire to be the holiest, the most enlightened, or the one who alone possesses the truth. This is the peril of the single-minded fanaticism that can accompany any absolute ideal. This links directly to the theme of failure and its consequences. The Arthurian romances are, in the end, a tragedy. The Grail quest is the catalyst for the downfall of the Round Table. The knights, who once formed a cohesive brotherhood dedicated to collective justice, scatter to the winds on their individual spiritual journeys. Many die not in glory, but in despair, futility, or by each other's hands. Sir Lancelot, the greatest knight in the world, is rendered helpless and humiliated by his earthly desires. His son Galahad achieves the Grail, but in doing so leaves the world behind. his perfection offering no lasting solution for the kingdom he abandons. The quest reveals that the ideals of celestial chivalry are incompatible with the messy reality of earthly governance and human relationships. The pursuit of a transcendent, absolute good can lead to the neglect of earthly responsibilities and the people who depend on us. The healing of the Fisher King comes at the cost of the wasting of Camelot. On a psychological level, the shadow of the quest is obsession. The seeker can become so fixated on the goal, the healing, the answer, the enlightenment, they cease to live. Life becomes a means to an end, and the present moment is perpetually sacrificed for a future fulfillment that may never come. This is a form of spiritual bypassing, where the quest for a grand solution is used to avoid dealing with mundane but necessary personal issues. The Grail becomes a symbol of deferred life. The seeker, like the Fisher King, becomes passive and waiting, not for a question, but for a miracle that will solve everything without requiring them to truly engage with the world. The quest itself becomes the wound. Finally, the Grail legend powerfully illustrates the danger of the unasked question. Percival's initial failure is not one of action, but of inaction born from a misguided sense of propriety. He fails to act from his heart. This silence is a metaphor for the failures of communication and compassion that plague human relationships. How often do we, for fear of being rude, looking foolish, or being vulnerable, fail to ask the question that could heal a relationship, clarify a misunderstanding, or offer solace? The wasted opportunity in the Grail Castle is a timeless human tragedy. It reminds us that healing often does not require heroic deeds, but the simple, courageous act of reaching out and asking, "What is wrong? How can I help? Whom does this serve?" The shadow is not in the seeking, but in the silence that prevents connection. By acknowledging this shadow side, the Grail legend becomes infinitely richer and more human. It is not a simple fairy tale of success. It is a profound warning about the perils of idealism, the cost of transcendence, and the easy slide from devotion into obsession. It teaches us that the goal, however holy, should not eclipse the humanity of the journey itself. The true Grail may not be found in the ecstatic vision at the end of the quest, but in the compassion and connection we practice along the way. Part 15. The final chapter. The Grail within. We have traversed centuries and continents, delved into myths and manuscripts, and explored theories both scholarly and sensational. We have seen the Grail as a Celtic cauldron, a Christian chalice, a knightly test, a bloodline, a psychological archetype, and a cultural mirror. We have followed its path through history and its evolution in the human psyche. Now, as we arrive at the final chapter of this exploration, we must confront the ultimate destination of the quest, not a hidden castle or a forgotten tomb, but the interior landscape of the self. The true, final answer to the question of the Holy Grail's reality may lie in the profound realization that the Grail is not an object to be found, but a state of being to be realized. The Grail is within. This concept, though it sounds like a modern New Age abstraction, is deeply embedded within the oldest layers of the legend. The very structure of the quest is an internal map. The wasteland is not just a kingdom in a story. It is a metaphor for a life lived without meaning, purpose, or connection, a state of spiritual and emotional drought that every human experiences at times. The wounded Fisher King represents that part of ourselves that feels broken, impotent, and unable to create or nurture life, be it through trauma, regret, fear, or alienation. He is the ruler of our inner world, and his suffering manifests in our external experience. The young quester, whether Percival or Galahad, symbolizes our own conscious ego, our sense of I, setting out from the familiar, the court, into the unknown, the forest of the unconscious. On a journey of transformation, the trials and adventures are the challenges, setbacks, and moments of grace that force us to grow, to question our assumptions, and to develop courage and compassion. They are the necessary struggles that shape us. The Grail Castle appears not at a fixed point on a map, but at a moment of psychological readiness. It emerges from the mist when the seeker is lost, humble, and has exhausted their own cleverness. This signifies that moments of profound insight and potential healing occur when we surrender our rigid plans and are open to grace. It is a state of receptive awareness, and the Grail itself, it is the symbol of wholeness, the self in the Genjian sense, the unified center of the psyche that integrates the conscious and the unconscious. It is the state of being where our inner wounds are acknowledged and integrated, not just magically healed. Its light is the light of consciousness itself, illuminating the dark corners of our being. To achieve the Grail is to achieve a state of inner unity, where we are no longer at war with ourselves, where our actions are aligned with our deepest values, and where we feel a sense of connection to something greater than our individual ego. This is why the question, whom does the Grail serve, is the key to the entire legend. The answer, revealed in the highest versions of the story, is that the Grail serves the Grail, King, the healed and whole self. The question is a call to introspection. It asks, what is the highest principle guiding my life? What master does my soul serve? Is it ambition, fear, the approval of others, or is it a deeper, more authentic calling? The quest fails when we seek the Grail to serve our ego, to gain power, glory, or validation. It succeeds only when we seek to serve the Grail, to live a life aligned with wholeness, truth, and compassion. Therefore, the Holy Grail is both legend and reality. It is a legend because its historical existence as a physical object remains a beautiful story. It is a reality because it describes a universal and eternal human experience, the journey toward self-discovery and integration. The castle is not made of stone, but of awareness. The Grail is not made of gold, but of meaning. The quest is not a path through a forest, but the journey of a lifetime. The chalice, the stone, the dish, these are all vessels. And what is the human heart and mind, if not the ultimate vessel? We are the ones who contain thoughts, feelings, love, fear, and hope. We are the keepers of our own sacred truth. The true Holy Grail is the human capacity to seek, to love, to heal, and to find meaning in the face of mystery. It is not lost. It has been here all along, waiting not to be found, but to be recognized. The quest ends not with a discovery, but with a remembrance. We are the Grail we seek.